we've never been closer together, all these layers, right? They've never been so tightly woven. And so no matter where you hit this infrastructure, what layer you're at, you're closer to the next layer than you've ever been before. And one thing I underestimated is how approachable the people are within this industry. So when you said, email us, you volunteered that for us. I don't know anybody on this panel that would disagree with you.
Yeah, and that's what I really wanted to bring back to, as in terms of an industry, I really do believe that the data center industry is different. I mean, I started out, at 25 as a market analyst. So I jumped from industry to industry. I did home appliances for 6 months, and then I did UPS backup power for 6 months, and I did IoT for 6 months. And I actively chose to stay in the data center industry and keep following, trying to do more research on that industry because it's completely different. And the way I did research at the time was by calling and talking to people. And I just had to chase people and cold call people I called Mr. Kaufman in Germany every morning for 20 days until he finally said he wasn't in a meeting. But what I just remembered sitting here is that you talked to me.
I was just looking it up going,
when
it's
you were
so
at
funny.
PayPal or Uber? Or?
May 28th, 2012. What's so funny is I never remembered. I'm like, you look so familiar. And so when we were talking on that, and then I look back up, I'm like, oh my God, we met through LinkedIn. She was a reporter at Tyra Spalding from the Edelman Group who set me up during the Uptime Symposium with the Santa Clara Convention Center to do, so this is when I was when it was at eBay, right? Yeah. And so, but then we connected again. It's such a small world.
Yeah, you were, as you said, a rock star, and I was just jumping from market to market. But I was welcomed into this industry, which was not the case with every other industry I was researching. So, I mean, it's just a very specific example of people really do help and reach out and educate you because, to your point, it's a big industry where you have to know about a lot of things. It's mechanical, it's electrical, it's IT, it's software, it's people, it's trades, it's everything.
And as soon as you figured it out, it just iterated again.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It just changed.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay.
But that's exciting.
Yeah. But it forces you.
Learning.
I see it as like a Peloton, and you have to stay with it or you're going to fall right at the back of it. Am I wrong?
Come on, Peloton,
you
let's
have
go.
to be pedaling because this industry grows so much, it changes so much more dynamic than every other industry, don't you think?
Yeah, and there's an openness, it's okay if you don't get it, because a lot of, I don't get a lot of it. I'm not an engineer,
Nobody
I'm
has
not
it all figured
technical. Yeah, so it's everyone's helping each other figure it out. There's a collaboration. And then one other thing I was going to say about, where Bill said, where have you seen success bringing people into the industry? Carrie Getz has a lot of good data on.
And a great book.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. On jobs that don't need college. And so this industry has a lot of really well-paying jobs where Ty Ciccone from Stack.
Oh, yeah.
TJ,
Yep.
yeah. He does a great job talking to high school kids and saying, you can make this much money, graduating with your
We had Carrie on here. I bought 100 books and gave them out to all. We had an Operation Hit event where we had a bunch of veterans come. And we're trying to, it takes everybody. I'm not going to write a book, right? But that's a good book to hand over because she does a good job of saying yeah, you're right. At DCAC, we had a bunch of Navy nukes rolling around. I promise you that there's a ton of non-technical people in this industry. And I have learned that they offer, I have amazing combat infantry people on my team that you would have never thought got in this industry. But their emotional range is so
calm under pressure.
Yeah, they're look, no one's getting shot today. No one's blowing up. We're all going home. We're going to figure this out, right? And
wow, that's your baseline?
Yeah.
100%. I mean, I got 1/3 of my team that used to kill evil for a living, and they're like, we're not killing anybody. We're not shooting at anybody today. No one's shooting back. And their ability to work through problems when everyone else is an emotional mess is a huge advantage. They don't have to be the smartest. This industry does not lack genius. It does not lack intelligence. It lacks leadership and the courage to stand up and ask questions. And in the military, they teach you to ask those things because you have no choice. Because if I jump here, I think you said here. No, you're I better know where I need.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I can die. Or someone else can die.
Oh, for sure.
I'm going to ask that question.
But I think that's the unique thing, that if a kid isn't getting that in an incubator in college, maybe they're learning it from sports, or if they're in a fraternity, they're learning little communities, maybe how to start a business or something like that. But college is there better be more than just what they're learning behind the grades, because the military has a bunch of people coming out that could be infantry or aviation boatswain's mates, or it doesn't matter. And I've hired them all. And I've learned that there's a role for them. There's 5 different phases of a data center life cycle. I think there's 9 different job domains that represent 265 different jobs within those 5 phases.
Wow.
There's a job for anybody
Absolutely.
in this space. And we just need to make this industry something that it's not even a light yet. And I've always envisioned that we'd create a collective that people would be drawn to it, but we have to create an orbit around the industry a little bit stronger. Don't you think?
I think your previous statement about helping people understand what the purpose is.
Yeah. This is
why. Why are we here doing what we're doing? Because we actually know that we build the underlying engines for the Internet of Everything, period. Like the world operates on the stuff we build. Yeah. That's a pretty big deal, right?
Think about that.
So what are we doing? And all of a sudden the world needs 3 times the amount.
This is
crap. Okay, how do we solve that problem? Great. Well, that's another one to go tackle. Sink your teeth into.
It's a safe industry. It's not going anywhere.
No.
It's
a utility. It becomes a
It is.
utility, right?
One thing,
definitely.
Bill does, well, you do a lot of things really well, but one thing that I think he does extremely well is get it down to a layman's person's understanding.
That's why I love him talking.
And so maybe for next year's conference, go back and take the top 10 buzzwords and say, WTF. What are they?
Let's scratch the paint on those.
Yeah.
Can you do that?
Generative AI.
Yeah.
Well, I think that if
Quantum computing.
I remember I defined generative AI using pugs.
Yes, you did.
I defined generative AI using pugs, where traditional AI, it's like a kid, right? You sit this kid down, right? And you show them picture after picture after picture of a pug, right? And eventually you're going to go to that kid and you're going to say, how many pictures of pugs did you see? And I'll say, well, actually, 13
You mean the little dog?
The little bug, yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
I'm trying to track him like this.
So I want to make sure everybody.
You're not a dog person, are you?
Literally pugs.
If they translate this, it might.
Yeah, they're really
not,
pugly.
Not a technical term. It's literally a cute little puppy.
Okay, great.
So eventually this kid's going to come back and say, well, I saw 13 black ones. I saw 12, fawn ones. I saw, maybe like 5 white ones. And, I bet you the next one you're going to show me is going to be a black one because you've shown me more of those than anything else. That is traditional AI, pattern-based recognition at its simplest form. Hold your hate emails. But generative AI, exact same thing. Same kid, same pictures, except now you take all those drawings away and you say, draw me a pug based on what I
Generate a pug.
Generate a pug.
Wow.
You see
An
that
AI can do that now?
Yes.
it generates content.
If you
But you could get it that.
If you go on ChatGPT.openai.com, I think that's the right address. And if you have a subscription to their GPT-4 model, if you go on extra services, there's one called DALL-E, D-A-L-L-E, right? You click on it and you can say, make me a company logo with a beautiful pug image on it.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet.
And it'll do anything you want. Draw me a pug that's, ruler of the universe. And you have this pug that's ruler of the universe. Short answer, yes.
Interesting.
Okay, tell me what you want generated.
Here we go.
Oh, here we
live.
go.
We're doing this live on air. Dean has to bring it to the camera.
I want an image of an octopus holding a trident.
Okay, hold on.
And
It's pretty good.
And, and then one tentacle, it says, I love data centers. I'm just saying, let's see how smart this
let's see
DALL-E thing is.
how it is. But that's the first step. I'm reading more history and technology now because we don't know what the future holds. We're in this unprecedented time. Things are changing so quickly. It's like, my little story is like, people are afraid of new things like the radio. Okay. So when they first started broadcasting baseball games on the radio, everybody freaked out. There's news articles. You can go search for them. And people were worried that kids would never play baseball again.
Oh,
But the radio actually served the Major League Baseball Association and grew baseball into the biggest thing it had ever been
because they can
before.
touch everybody now.
Because everybody got access. And that's a big part of, like, we talked about missions and drives. For me, I'm in this space because I want more people to have access to all the great things that I have access to, and make it cheaper and more sustainable and wider spread and more easily adopted. Like, that's my why. That's why I'm here. So, you know, when I look back, I'm trying to see, like, what are the concerns? There's real ones around AI, things like that. What are the potential benefits? And, you know, what other similar challenges are we going to run into? So,
What are you finding?
like, you know, it's, you can go back to, they fought electricity, right? One that actually, a story that came out when the Open Compute Project first started was railroads in the United States. And there used to be a bunch of different gauge systems all over this country based on where we brought the trains from, what countries, right? So they were all different widths. So then the tracks were all different widths in different spots. You can even go back to, like, Civil War history and say that railroad track widths probably had a massive impact on the outcome of the Civil War. And standardizing that track made huge positives and gained access for lots of people. And North American rail, I think, is, like, still, like, the cheapest way to move something on this planet right now. And it's because we standardized.
Is it like standardized to 1 or standardized to like 3?
It's 1. And actually, they're facing this challenge in, you know, Ukraine and Russia right now. The train track systems are not the same. So there's an impact on moving food through the world right now. And one of those main problems is that you can't get the food unless you take it off a rail car and move it to a boat or a truck or a different rail car. And there were riots in North America back at the time when they were trying to change these rail systems, because there were jobs of moving that material from one track system to another.
You're going to remove my job.
You're going to remove my job. And there were clunky solutions like axles with 3 wheels on them so they could fit on 2 different track sizes. And, like, that wasn't really efficient. It wasn't great. We really just needed to pull all the pins, kick the rail out a little bit, and make them all the same size.
Europe innovated, and they have the dynamic ones that will adjust. Literally, a train as it's flowing and the rail changes in size and width, it will dynamically lift and shift, like, without actually having to pull the train up and change the base.
Just putting
I'm not a
springs.
train expert.
No, me neither. You know what it sounds like.
Yeah, but they will shift and adapt those tracks when a new rail comes in. So that's a form of, you know, innovation where you could have these different types of standards, but you can shape and pull.
But if you think about the world right now, the reason that things actually are more efficient is because we come up with standards, right? Axles, trains, etc. There's a great book called Box, and it's about the shipping industry and how they can create standardized containers, shipping containers, 20 foot, 40 foot, 60 foot. Why? So they could fit on container ships, so they could fit on trucks, so they could actually be optimized to get things from A to B as fast as possible.
Yeah, can I challenge you about something? This is like the biggest thing that I've experienced in this industry. And usually, you know, we don't get a lot of people, you know, fisticuffs.
Let's go.
You know, and this is something that I've experienced in this industry. We talk about standardization, but we're not good at standardization in the data center space, right? We still are ready to like flip a chair or table over when we start talking about PUE and how it's measured. You know, now we're starting to throw in like total usage effectiveness, even water usage effectiveness, and people get all up in arms. And I think that the barrier to standardization, at least in our industry, is transparency. I haven't seen. We're transparent, certainly, but to the same extent, some of these larger data center players be quite as transparent as they should be, which stifles any standardization practice that we would want to go after. So while I do like the concept and idea of standardizing, and it would really help us a lot, I think, we're not very good at it. Are we getting better? I mean, I'm curious.
At what point, though? Like, what point are you expecting to see standardization? To what level? I mean, there's NASCAR. They all have their stock cars. The only differentiation is the driver and the pit crew, right? So operations is maybe never going to be standardized because that's maybe the secret sauce.
All right. And by the way, thank you for asking that question because
Let's hear what he says.
This is a reality that we have to face. Standards take a decade to actually formalize and get adopted. So if you look at the Climate Accord, why did we come together? Because we're not moving fast enough. Everybody's talking about, well, we should have a standard measure. We should have whatever else. But perfection is the enemy of progress. Okay? But what happens is a natural maturity over time. So take what we're talking about now, PUE. People still complain about it, but it's diminishing return. Why? Because we came up with a standard measurement that still is being tuned, but the result was what we wanted. It flattened the curve of power consumption because of all the waste that was on the right side of the decimal, because we had horrible PUEs. But what happened? Christian put that back out, donated it to the green grid, and everyone started debating, and then they started measuring. And when they started measuring...
Christian Bellotti was the guy that came up with that?
Yep. Christian was on an airplane ride coming back from Japan, trying to help the Japanese customers understand efficiency within data centers. And he said, well, then it comes down to power usage effectiveness. Like he literally came up with that, and then he put it, and then he said, green grid, you need to do something about it. He donated it to the green grid so that they could move it. And then what happened? The green grid standardized it. They put it into law through the DOE. I was actually at that session of the White House. It was really, really cool, where they went back and said, now we're going to use this as a standard and push all of the federal facilities, which was the largest data center portfolio in the world, by the way. Data centers,
was,
right?
or is?
Was then. I assume it's still big.
Okay.
But the point is that they drove that. Okay. We didn't stop progress because of a standard. We basically created a way to approach to get to a standard and make progress along the way. And I think that's the key. Like if we do not get going on something, we're never going to get there. But you have to have some guiding light of where you want to be. I want to be able to measure like this. So power capacity effectiveness. Why do they put that metric out? Because we waste so much capacity on the left side of the decimal, the 1. We don't utilize it, right? Okay. Well, why are we doing that? Because no one's measuring it. Okay. Well, I'll put out power capacity effectiveness. Now everybody's debating, well, what that one? We can't do this when we can't hold the 10. Great. Just ask your executives, right, to put that as a metric to track it, and it will change it. No matter what, just like PUE did, just like any other metric would be. So we can get to a standardized approach. I'm not saying that everything has to be driven with standards. It ultimately becomes standards. But that's the after effect of the transition and I think the disruption, because there's a forcing function that has to be there. And to do that, you need something that will make that forcing function happen. What is that for us?
Which nerd won that fight?
Innovation, I guess. I mean, nerd,
Sure.
yeah.
I think we all win that fight.
Oh, great answer. Good.
I said, which nerd wins this fight
Yeah,
right here?
we-
Oh yeah,
We all
I do have
win.
2 kids, so no, but I think we all win. Like if we're talking about what we're measuring or what we're trying to improve or where we're trying to go, and if there's debate, that's a good thing in my mind.
Yep.
Because if we're not talking about it, nothing's changing.
Or
if
it'll all
there's
be the same. Yeah, it's
Right.
It will be.
And so, maybe they don't all have to be NASCAR. Maybe they don't have to be stock cars, because I don't think our industry is really going to play where everybody's driving the same stock car.
Yeah. Or they don't have to be the same set of rails either.
Right. But maybe they're more like Formula One, right? Where they meet a same set of standards, yet they all have different competitive advantages and play within those bounds
That
in a
makes way more
competitive way.
sense.
I think we're also talking about like 2 different types of standards. Like you're talking about a standard that was required for like the physicalness of something that hindered progress versus the standard for like best case operations, which is PUE. So there's a different, I think like how you build something really does demand standards versus how you improve a process or operate something demands debate, and I think putting something out there to drive action makes sense. But in terms of like the things I care about from OCP, like I really would like pipe sizes to be standardized,
Right. That's
Wow. That's a good ask. That's a very good ask.
Hey, well,
What do
that's
you
not
want
an
to
ask of me. I'm,
Okay.
that's the
not
community,
an ask
right?
of me. That's the community, right? So the foundation is really just the framework in which all of our volunteers work. And these 400 member companies with 3,000 plus engineers come together daily on phone calls and debate these exact things, right? And they're currently debating pipe size and best practices and what types of fittings to use. And, data center folks have been playing in air for a really long time, unless you're mechanical working on chillers, but that's pretty standard. But now we're going to bring it into the rack. Now we're going to bring it in these environments. There's a knowledge and a skill set there that hasn't fully translated yet. So we need the chip manufacturers and we need the rack manufacturers and all the pieces and parts and the people who are going to integrate it and install it and maintain it. All have to come to the table to discuss how are we doing this and can we agree on at least some base criteria.
And the open compute community is so critical for that because, by the way, you open sourced hardware, right? You open source network, and you also open source data center. And I think what's important is, just like we talk about the military, you can't actually understand until you've experienced it. When you experienced it, you have a different level of appreciation and understanding to apply it in a certain way. So when we now take the hardware manufacturers who are trying to do a liquid-cooled solution, it sure would be good to go back and take these mechanical engineers that actually do data centers and deal with this at a totally different scale and marry them. Yeah. Because then you really get a system that is highly optimized because they've been there, done that, right? The hardware side's been there, done that, but they don't know that.
Absolutely.
So this is where I think open compute is really important because the community comes together and say, can we get to a standard pipe size? Well, why? What's it going to do? What are we going to measure? How is it going to work? The right people in the room will get to a standard that everyone would go, yep, that'll be highly optimized.
Yeah, it's well said. I mean, we've operated even within our disciplines in solos, though we're a very large community. We have sub-communities. We have these individual projects, right? And we talk about just servers or we talk about just network. And I'll challenge you, Bill, on standardization around network. I mean, network's pretty standard.
Yep.
I think that's fine, but I think from a broader data center perspective.
Oh yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Network standardizations. I mean, you're not going to have a successful flow of traffic unless you're going to have some level of standardization, which I agree with you. Yes,
that happened in an open collaborative environment. I mean, the Open Compute project, like network technology, we drive that. We're not just doing a more efficient, more open version of that
for the industry. You mean.
For the industry.
Oh yeah,
we're so impactful.
Big time.
On network, it's crazy, and we're also getting feedback that we're impactful in cooling environments. Like
especially now.
Yeah.
Like it is so super critical now because it's never been this important with the density.
Why don't, Bill, maybe you start and take us around the horn on the things that you think are the challenges, like people that are listening right now that are now gaining a foundation of understanding of how they connect to AI through their profession in this industry. What are some of the challenges that you see this industry's going to continue to be presented with over the next, I mean, I'm guessing we have to play the long game. We're thinking about this thing in decades, right? But what are some of the low-hanging fruit maybe, or some of the things that you see that we're almost emerging from, or there's almost a boiling point to something, and maybe we just go around the horn because each of you has such a, like I said, we each have our own purpose and everyone's viewing things through their own optics. You know, your aperture is different than mine, so to speak. Why don't you start with yours and take us around, because I want it to be able to be something that people that are listening to go, okay, well, I could probably be a part of that solution, right? That's what you want, is you want to have these discussions so that somebody is just driving down the road or they're, you know, on the treadmill at the gym or whatever. And they're like, wait a second, our product can do that, right? So why don't you lay it out?
Man, it's a good question. Neu.ro was founded in 2019, and they entered a market where they became the de facto white label cloud, the AWS SageMaker, basically. Unfortunately, they were in Russia. As a Ukrainian company, you can understand how that's a big problem. So the company in itself entirely, and we're talking people, IP, everything, shifted to the US market last year. So no more, we're not in Eastern Europe or Russia anymore. And coming into the United States market, we learned a lot. What were some of the biggest challenges? Adoption pace. Like people
faster than you thought?
No. Slow.
Really?
Snail.
Oh my God, slow.
Snail pace.
Like it took us 8 months to bring up officially one partner who is brilliant. I'll call him out. Scott Data Center out in Omaha, Nebraska.
Get it?
And they're like, we hear you, Bill. We're going to do this because we spoke with our clients and we already have their workloads. We have their Exchange servers. We have their databases. So we're like, can we have your AI workloads too and charge you way less than you're being charged right now? And they're like, you would do that? And they're like, heck yeah. So it took them, we're almost this close to launching a portal with Neu.ro, our logo on there, with them going full blown. Another use case was former Ethereum miners. They had a whole bunch of A100 nodes that they're like, I wonder what we can do with these to make a better business model. They were easier, right? Because they already had infrastructure. The pace of adoption has been the most challenging thing. We as an interoperability platform, we're ready. We're done. The car is built. We just need the roads. So for us, the slowest link is the infrastructure, is the facility, right? So to an extent where I use Dean's gear to put it into a facility so that a data center company can test out the water. So literally they're putting their logo on Dean's gear, right? They're testing it out. I'm getting off track. The biggest challenge that we've experienced in terms of helping and facilitating data centers and people get into the generative AI, just the AI space, to become actual competitors in this market, is unfortunately fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's just slowness. It's the slowness of people coming out and saying, okay, let's adopt this. And the reasoning behind that is because we are so used to selling space capacity and power. And that's it, right? Going into the services area, competing against the major hyperscalers, to some people it's nascent, it's scary, but it's an existential question and challenge because every data center is going to become an AI data center. It all depends on how quickly you get there. And so what we've been trying to do is accelerate that process. And it's still not very easy at all. We still get pushback. We still get, and we provide monetization, revenue cycles. We provide how it's going to look. We literally give them the book on what this business will look like. And it's still like, all right, well, let's take our time. Maybe we can put a little bit of stuff in here. And that's
Do you have people marketing that for you so that when smart people make other things for other smart people, it's hard unless you have a marketing element to it sometimes to help them understand something?
It's not even marketing. The dollars are there and the business is there. Where we've learned when a data center partner does buy into this, it's their board of directors and investors that are the happiest because we've given them a new line of business, a direct, really market relevant source of revenue. We've created a valuation accelerator for them. And they really didn't have to lift a finger other than continue to be amazing at what they do. As long as they put the Neu.ro platform on there, they can still continue to sell space capacity and power. And that takes ages.
I think this conversation that you just had makes a lot of sense to me, but I think that's marketing the way you described it is what I'm saying. It doesn't mean like it has a cool, flashy thing to it, but I mean like someone has to break it back down to help them feel something about it because the other part of their brain that makes that decision.
And we've done this time and time again. My success is the ability to speak with C-level people. And it's a process. All right, cool, Bill. Really like it. Let's do a demo. Bill, this demo is really cool. What does the physical infrastructure look like? Cool. This physical infrastructure is really cool. What does it look like to deploy this? And this takes 5 to 6 months just for a data center partner to say, let's do it.
Everything's like that though. Then it has a tipping point, right?
But
so
then
it takes
to deploy gear. Now, what's great with Dean is that I can call Dean and get V100s like tomorrow, right? Not tomorrow, but very quickly, today, in fact. But if I try and go with like H100s or A100s, we're talking like an extraordinary amount of time.
52-week lead time now.
So your biggest challenge that you see from AI's adoption is the adoption. And that probably comes back to the people that have the ability to understand at the level which you're talking about. And sometimes when I say marketing, I mean like, has it been broken down for paint by numbers some people? Because if someone's in finance and they're making purchasing decisions, they don't understand AI.
We don't talk to people. We literally, our goal has been to talk to C-level executives, C-level individuals.
Ties back to finance.
Yeah, and it's the idea and the conversations that we have to show them. What does it cost? What does it cost per kilowatt? How do you make money on this? All of that stuff is proven. Now, I'm not pulling the stuff out of the air. For example, we've done this at a massive scale at my company. It's just an educational process for many of these leaders.
So it sounds like you shouldn't be trying to work on the car anymore. You need to start figuring out who has to build roads for you, right? To put it back into your own terms. And that's what he was saying. The gold rush, the people that made the most were the people selling the pans and the pickaxes, right? So
there's one more thing I want to make sure we mention, we talk about here. For anyone listening who thinks that NVIDIA is the only horse in this race, you are wrong. Even though they currently have 70% of the market, that's going to end. So we've done at my company, we've built out hybrid nodes. So AMD MI200s sitting right alongside NVIDIA A100 cards. And what we've done in our platform is, because it's complex that you have to translate from, like, for example, CUDA to Synapse and others, we don't do that. Each of our training workloads runs what's called an atomic workload, individual on each card, so that there's no translation, which means that in the very, very, very near future, you will have a hybrid architecture supporting these kinds of environments, right? Not just NVIDIA. So to your earlier point, It's understanding how this adoption can happen at a better pace and not being afraid of it and seeing how it can fit into your business. And once that aha moment happens, here's the reality of the situation. When we pitch this to a retail data center, we say, full stop, go ask your customers. Go ask your customers that you already host if they would bring their AI workloads and you charge them 50% less. What would they say?
Well, I think that what you deal with is that herd mentality where you have everyone standing around the pool and they're just waiting for the first one to jump in sometimes, right? So I imagine the first one through the wall is always the bloodiest. So if you're innovating or at the tip of the spear or something, it takes a little bit of time, to get that adoption rate to hit. But it sounds like that first mover's advantage always pays off. I mean, look at, we were talking about Elon, right? Talking about the cars. And there was a time there where I was talking to one of my old CEOs and he's like, oh yeah, the only people who made money on Tesla were those that were handicapping or betting against the business. And I'm like, not anymore, right?
Yeah. Have you seen the stock?
Exactly right. So I'm like, and he didn't care because he was like, I remember I watched an interview and he's like, you think I did this to make money? I did it to change the industry.
Yeah.
And he did. Yeah. And he goes, the people that rode with me, they'll be fine, right? So changing things takes time, right? And that makes a lot of sense. What about on you, Dean?
Well, actually, I just want to expand a little bit on what he just said.
Mm-hmm.
It takes an open mind and disrupting your own business. Because right now, if you look at colos, retail, et cetera, they have a certain amount of things that they do. Suddenly saying, well, I'm going to be an AI data center, what does that mean? But
there are some colos that will get it.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
5% of the colo markets, their CEOs are innovators too, and they're like, I want it. You just need to find those ones.
The thing is, the difference here is the Peter Gross quote. The majority of them are still looking at, well, that's a tried and true tested model.
Why change?
I can't expand out from that. I think what Bill's offering here is that the easy button is through Neu.ro. In other words, you can leverage what they've already built, white label it, offer it to your customers, leverage Cato capacity in your data center. This isn't about you reinventing and coming up with a technology. It literally exists. Package it as yours and make it available.
This isn't VMware. This isn't Citrix. This isn't like these old school technologies that we grew up with virtualization. The pace of this market is so extraordinary that like you can't wait 6 to 8 months because you're going to lose that business to some major.
What will it do to VMware? What will it do to those types of groups?
VMware and Citrix are they're
will they not
Citrix
ever go anywhere?
Something they got bought. Those are legacy technologies, in my opinion. And someone who was at one point the CTO of the United States' largest Citrix Platinum partner, we realized that they were a bridge on how to deliver legacy applications to modern, web UIs and workloads. That's what they did, right? Part of the reason now VMware has a strong foothold in the data center. Let's full stop there. They have a much bigger reach. But folks like, Citrix, that they grew up on, the Interconnect Exchange protocol, the ICA protocol. And that's was their life in terms of trying to take these legacy. I remember trying to virtualize a Mochasoft green screen for an AS400, IBM AS400 ecosystem so I can put it into Citrix. It has its use cases, but they're two completely different technologies, right? Where Citrix and VMware are nice to haves or maybe very important for infrastructure. What we're talking about here are entire new revenue models. I mean, completely different paradigms in how you can adapt to this. Again, the biggest change here, and what I really want to emphasize, what Dean was saying, is there's no the pace of the market adoption here is way different than virtualization, way different than even, I would argue, cloud computing. The pace at which this is happening is so extraordinary that, again, it's the customers of these co-locations that are now driving so many of my conversations. And I'm stuck because I don't have capacity, or I'm trying to build out capacity so we can deploy more of these workloads. And I don't have an amazing data center partner. Now, the other challenge is if I have a data center partner I got all these GPUs, a customer's reticent to move because then they're like, I got to bring in my own tool set, PyTorch, Lambda, whatever it is that I build models with. I have to rebuild all of this as opposed to having a platform to build all this on. So going back to my biggest challenge, it's frustrating. Yes, adoption takes time, but it's adoption within what I would consider like the molten lava of a market space right now that I would have expected probably more retail data centers like, let's do this.
Interesting.
Sorry, I got passionate there for a second.
No, I like it.
Frustrated.
Yeah. This is interesting. All right. This is great.
I think the flow is going to be good. I want to hear what your frustration is because I'm just anticipating that the rotation of this room, it's going to stack. It's going to be great.
The pieces all fit together.
They do.
It's not really a frustration. I think it's a risk on my side. It's that our industry has been very I guess, quiet, or just we don't talk to a lot of other people. We make a lot of assumptions. So I think we've got a social issue. Let me explain what that means. Bill and I were both out in the East Coast, and we saw people picketing the conference we were at.
That was the first time I
What were they
ever
picketing?
No more data centers. You're taking our power.
Like-
you're
Oh,
taking
in
our jobs.
Virginia.
You're
Like,
taking
I
our-
can see
right?
that.
a lot of people, like they were upset and holding signs.
Standing in front of the hotel we were in. And what's
Interesting.
great is Bill and Yuval and others went over and actually had the conversation. Now, this is what's important about this. We are about to triple our infrastructure. And you think about Loudoun County, Virginia. It used to be the poster child for economic development and all the opportunities. And all of a sudden, the opinion flipped from certain people are going, wait, but you're taking all our land, you're taking our power, you're taking our things. So there's a community aspect of this that I don't know if we truly understand. And so what we need to do is think of how do we build in an ecosystem? Because digital infrastructure is the great equalizer. It is the way to participate in the digital economy. If you do not have digital infrastructure, it's like not having an off-ramp from the freeway. They're just going to drive past you. So if you take all the cities, states, countries, et cetera, you have to have digital infrastructure. Now we flip that around and go, well, what does that mean when we actually roll it in? What does it mean to the people that actually live there? What does it mean to their kids? What does it mean to jobs? What does it mean to the infrastructure, the support systems of the fire stations and the libraries and the schools and everything else? It is a community component that we need to think about. And I think that we have not been looking at it. And this was really evident just in what we've seen across Ireland. So this is happening there, Amsterdam, Singapore, right? Loudoun County. There's a whole bunch of people that are either banning data centers or throttling the expansion, right? Or actually creating a narrative about that's like the new oil and that oil is dirty and it's killing the planet versus it is the thing that's enabling the planet. So we have both a education, bidirectional. This is for them to educate us as well as us educate them, and a community collaboration that we need to come together on. So I think that's a pretty big risk.
That's why
for
I think
us.
this industry needs to hit a bigger platform that has a broader audience that it could touch. Because I think too many people just don't understand.
Right, and they fill in the blanks if you don't go back and actually have a clear message on what it is. And by the way, a lot of people position this as a PR problem. It's not a PR problem. This is literally about how do you engage with your stakeholders in which you operate in those environments. If you do not engage with those stakeholders, you don't know exactly what they know, what they don't know, what they care about, what the impact is, and you cannot make the right decision because you have the wrong information or don't have enough information for it. So just like the climate accord, we're considering a social accord. Because if you look at ESG, right? Environmental is what we're doing with the climate accord. Social, we need to deal with this. Governance is how do we measure the effectiveness of environmental and social impacts of digital infrastructure, right, within the communities in which we operate. So stay tuned. We're exploring some of that.
There's got to be other markets like Wyoming and Nebraska, or that are like, bring it here, we'll take it.
You'd be surprised. Yes, like Omaha, Nebraska is actually a really great market. We invited two of those protesters, Elena and Julie, to come. I was leading a panel at DCD, Virginia, and it was social, PR issues in the data center. It was going to be a whole bunch of data center people talking to themselves. So I bring up, I know a couple people. Let me bring them on board, and their concerns were valid. Their concerns were very.
What were
valid.
their concerns?
And some of them required a little bit of education. For example, they were concerned about building facilities that were close to national battlegrounds, for example, right? But the counter to that was that these facilities were only going to be limited to 60 feet in height. And if there's going to be issue with visibility, they were going to put natural shrubbery over there. Cool. The other challenge was you have so many diesel generators here. There's no way you can do this. You're going to pollute our air. So the conversion there was great. Some of these facilities are actually using vegetable oil, hydrogenated vegetable oil, HVO, that removes 85% of those emissions from those generators. So again, there's concerns that have to be met with realism. Now, the one thing that I don't agree with that came out from that panel, right? NIMBY, not in my backyard. Fine, right? We can work around. But one of the activists said something that I will never agree with. She taught me a new acronym, NOTE.
Note.
Not over there either. Which I'm like,
all right, well, that's
You want to go? I mean, what do you want me? How
Tell
do
them
I
to hand over their phones and their
Yeah,
technology. Say, just don't use tech anymore, and we won't need these things.
It becomes impossible, right? So there needs to be a balance. But Dean Nelson, I mean, holy cow! What a great. That is something that we absolutely need to become much more.
So that's the biggest challenge for AI's liberation, or before we unleash it, is educating communities that are building infrastructure to support this type of growth. You're saying we can't have the resistance.
AI has become a megaphone for people, and all of a sudden we are now more in the mainstream than we've ever been before in the past. There was a South Park episode for everybody watching. I highly recommend this one. It's called Deep Learning. And at the very end of the credits, I don't want to give it away, it said written by Matt Stone and ChatGPT. It's scary. It's scary good. It's scary good, right? And so all of a sudden, these pieces of our industry are hitting the limelight. They're being discussed on CNBC or Fox or whatever you want to listen to.
Typically from finance, because someone's investing big into something, or someone just bought somebody. But I think that it's light years out still. I mean, I think that it could be rapidly brought back in through the right platforms. You need a celebrity almost to get into this industry and be like, I get it. You need something like that.
It's an influencer outside of our industry.
I'm gonna see if I can hit up Tay or
100%.
something. Maybe she'll talk about data centers.
Who?
But just to wrap that up, to wrap that up, I think the key is that we need to have that collaboration, because if we do not, it will throttle our ability to expand infrastructure globally. And just last thing on this, when I was in Africa, we held a regional advisory council session with hyperscalers and providers. And we went back and said, so tell us the challenges across Africa. It's very different. And it really was, well, the providers are saying, I don't know what the demand is. And then you've got the demand folks saying, I don't know what they're providing.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. And then on top of that, you have the government saying, I don't know what this is. I should probably just regulate it. Governments. So we're actually working on a state of the industry report that's going to have a deep dive into Africa, India, and LATAM to help do that. And one of the things that I'm doing is calling our friends in the hyperscale side and basically saying, tell us what your forecasts are for Africa. Because I can do that. I have no commercial interest in any of this. It really goes back to, if we understand that and we marry it with this, then we say, here are the top 5 things for economic development in Africa that each one of the governments should consider. Now, all of a sudden, we're creating a playbook and educating them on the opportunity, which will grease the skids that allows them to go do 10 gigawatts capacity across the continent. That's the kind of thing we need to do. So
that's a standard.
Anyways, but it really comes down to community engagement. You still have to say, how do I go into Africa? How do I go into Loudoun County? How do I go into Wyoming?
Prince William County.
There's stakeholders in all of them.
This has been great so far. So I have 2 of them so far. I'm interested in what yours is.
We are coming out of a period of building, what we thought we were coming out of from the pandemic and all the impacts of going more digital. And in the analyst reports that I've been reading, and I've been doing a lot more of that lately, shout out to our fellow analysts, is that growth in this industry from a physical infrastructure perspective has been sub 10% for a very long time. In the last 5 quarters, it's been double digits. And the supply chain from the infrastructure that was starting to fade off from all the building going on because of the pandemic is now getting bolstered back up and maybe pushed even harder. Yeah. And in 2 major categories, power and cooling. Mm-hmm. Physical infrastructure for data centers. That's what's bringing this number up into double digits growth. The tons and tons of chips haven't even landed yet. They're not even here yet. And I think there's a lot of people putting those into place, your largest buyers, right? And it's not just NVIDIA chips, it's lots of other chips that are coming in the space. We're creating open standards so that multiple types of silicon, not just NVIDIA, can be used in the same environment. We're creating standards so that it's not just even one supplier, it's going to be 5 suppliers or more building all these things. We're dealing with one right now at the promise of what they're going to build. In 2 to 3 years, we're going to be dealing with a multitude of that at a scale that's much higher. So the infrastructure that has to be built to support that technology, that supports the demand that we're putting on it, is a really tall order.
You're talking about like the semiconductor fabrication plants that are building chips here?
Beyond that, so we have that, but then you have to house it, and you have to cool it, and you have to power it.
No.
the stuff that we're most familiar with, right? On the physical infrastructure side, the MEP world, right? The tangible buildings. We got to build it right this time, because we're going to continue to use the existing infrastructure to the best of its ability. We're also going to deploy new technologies and new innovations that are going to have to take this round one of generative AI and technology around it. And we're just scratching the paint on AI. And we're all kind of here at the front row going, oh boy, we're going to have this conversation again in a couple of years, and it's going to be a lot bigger than what we're even dealing with today. So we have to come together on those issues. We have to innovate faster than ever, even though we don't like it unless it's 10 years old. We have to be a good neighbor and not just, use good sound attenuation and paying our more than fair share of taxes. We have to really be in the community and not just a building that lives on a piece of land that's next to a community. And we have to have transparency to have those conversations so that we can create standards that most of us can get along with so that we can move forward.
Okay. Interesting. So volume and innovation is what you're saying is the biggest limitation for...
It's going to be, the scale is going to be the hardest. If you're going to put it in one bit, scale is going to be a challenge.
And the standardization to enable that scale to happen?
So education, which I think would lead to a solution for your adoption rate, community impact, scalability. Where's yours?
I think in terms of you need to build for the future requires education today. So in terms of what you said, things are going to be hybrid for a while. We're not all moving to liquid tomorrow. So in terms of starting to educate yourself on how you should be building in the future, whether that's because you're going to have a compute that demands liquid cooling, or whether that's because it's maybe silly to spend 40% of your power on air cooling when there's a better solution. And I think the only reason that you would build for air, and I feel like part of this, me saying to educate, I should share what I've learned. Part of why you would do that is if you're avoiding risk, right? And so I published a forecast on liquid cooling in 2012, and it was very unpopular because I was very negative because it was like, this isn't going to happen.
Oh, you were saying it's not going to be adopted quickly?
No, I was like, who would want to do that? Like, it was crazy, right? Like, why would you want to, immersion has its place for sure. Like, for sure, there's edge use cases for that. But
Bitcoin miners were using it first in the wide scale, right?
Yeah, but it's radical, right? And then single phase direct to chip, like it's water in your servers. That's pretty radical too. So I do think, and it's the reason I left Informa. I loved that job. I love working with Bill. But there's a new technology for liquid cooling, and that's Accelsius does that. It's 2-phase direct to chip, and it's not a radical form factor. It's in a normal rack. It can be hybrid. So you can start today and scale up as you need. And most importantly, the 2-phase means that if there's a leak and, God forbid leaks don't happen, but life happens, it doesn't destroy your compute. So there's not no risk, but there's as much risk as buying a Liebherr, So I think there is an opportunity to educate, kind of reduce that fear as you're kind of like thrown into this phase where you're going to have to do something smarter to have enough power to power your compute, and or your chips will demand it. So you're going to need liquid cooling probably to start educating.
I can understand why the cooling part is the hardest to adopt because, we don't really change the way we deploy electrons, right? But the mechanical permutation it's harder to future-proof that, right? Yeah. And I think that I can imagine being one of those people standing at the edge of the pool being like, I'll be the last one to go in because maybe by the time that it's ready, there's a whole nother chip and I'm going to have to solve for it all over again, right? There's always going to be an aftermarket, so to speak, not what you're saying, but you're repurposing things to give it more life. And I think that allows people to probably make decisions to take pressure off them from a mechanical perspective because they know that they could hold on to that gear longer and they could solve for their environment. I could definitely understand after this conversation, I'm like, I could understand why operators, they don't want to touch you. I could totally understand why operators don't want to touch you. They know that it's inevitable, but why would they be? There's only 5% of that market where they're like, we'll be the first. Like, you need to go talk to like Jake Carnemark or something like that, who he's got a big fat brain too. He's thinking 5-10 years out all the time. Nothing's code locked with that man, right? He's going to be someone that's like, yeah, we could build around that, but you need to find those people because those are the ones that pull everything else through, right?
The disruptors.
I love your pool analogy. I love it, right? You can stand on the deck for as long as you want and every new chip is going to come out, but eventually you're going to have to learn to swim. And you're going to have to get in, right? So, and because at least once you're swimming and you know what that pool's like, yeah, there you go. you can get out and go to a different pool that's got a better, lane system or whatever it is. But like you can wait you can wait as long as you want. It's like, but eventually you're gonna have to. You can put floaties on if you want.
we have floaties that are coming out on open compute stuff because we have.
You just literally took that. Well,
I did. Well, I'm building on it.
Thank you.
Right,
Building on it.
Yeah, that's right. So
I like.
We had an issue in the enterprise environment, right? Hyperscalers. It's pretty easy to adopt our stuff. It's different than traditional hardware, but if you're deploying a lot of it, you do whatever you want, pretty much. But in the enterprise environment, you might have sunk costs in existing hardware.
Sure.
So and what I should say is our community of vendors have solutions for adopting 19-inch and 21-inch equipment in the same rack. Like our power is a little different, right? We distribute power from the back of the rack. We don't have PDUs with whips. But you could put servers that need PDUs with whips in the same rack as OCP hardware now. And so having those floaties for new deployments is going to be super helpful in a very hybrid environment.
You know who helps you too? Who helps all of you is when you're trying to go, like half of our customers are the hyperscaler baby scalers, right? And the other half are the operators. And it's not unusual for me to have a team of people in a facility, like one of Crosby's, and then one of their clients also hired us to do their entire fit out, right? And manage that stuff. I think that you have to pick up that third rail, and there's a lot of consultants like us that are owners' representatives. We're ambassadors for them. They have their people, and then they go out and hire people when they need them to come in and tell them what's the most economically efficient means and method to deploy this. And I think that you're missing that rail. You should be talking to more people that sit inside other decision makers' offices as a consultant, and they ask us to validate things. We don't play Caesar and make decisions, but we certainly have the ability to put things in front of them that they otherwise wouldn't even know about because they're too busy doing their own stuff. They're not out there trying to be ahead of line or best in class in certain things at this point from a labor perspective because you can't keep up with that. That model was untenable because you would invest so much into that human being, and then that human being they could have the biggest brain ever, but then someone else could offer them 20% more and they're gone tomorrow, right? And now all that tribal knowledge went with them. So I think that there's got to be a better approach, a more strategic approach to how you impregnate the ecosystem with this knowledge so that they could go carry it through for you, staying on the standardization, because there's plenty of groups that they don't know what they don't know, and they will hire someone else to be like, well, how are the other guys doing it? We get asked those questions all the time. Like, we don't exchange proprietary information on the way that people deploy or deliver their power, but sometimes I'm like, well, they definitely aren't doing that, right? So there's a lot of things that you can do to move it away and to advance the system. And I think that takes place in the way that we drive the industry together in these conversations. But
and people don't want vendor lock-in either, right? Like they don't want to be stuck. Like, okay, it could be the latest and greatest and all the math pencils out and like, this is the new technology, it's going to work great. But what if something changes? Our relationship with that vendor changes, the economics change, the pool looks better over there. Like those things can change. But when you use a platform that is modular and adoptable, like Cato uses, and you layer on top of that a platform that has tons of choice, that helps adoption a lot, right? We've seen that in the market where, well, if you like this today and something new comes out tomorrow, how hard is it to switch? If you put your customers in a position that make them easier to make changes and keep them happy, then that's a much better place to be.
Let me wrap this up and then we'll bring this one home unless anybody has anything else. But I'll tell you how it ties into me then, because understanding everybody else's allows me to understand how I play within your guys' world. I'm not in your world. I mean, I'm in your world, but I'm on the outside building the box and saying, put your world in this thing type of thing. And I think that as everyone's moving to standardization and as we're really turning everything that we're doing as a service, right? I think that companies like mine will do two things. We will become laser focused on the deployment of AI capacity. We will one day hopefully be the preeminent solution for that because it's going to be so aggressive. You need someone like us that are just as excited about it, to be able to follow along that.
Move it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's going to grow. It won't code lock anytime soon. That's why that mechanical solution, I could see how the adoption of that would be like, well, let's wait and see what comes out in 6 months from now, right? But I could see it. You just need to make a case and be like, well, this stuff's not going anywhere in 3 to 5 years. In fact, it could be used for 10 now. And the demand will create the need to invest long term into that stuff. So I think you'll have groups like us that become advanced and specialized on the deployment of AI capacity. And I think you're going to need collaborators with you that will tell you what that impact is on the labor force, because that's the second part, is labor, turning labor into a service. And I think that there will be this, I think that if I was asking the guys that run this podcast for us, I'm like, what are some of the other podcasts you see come through these boxes, right? And they're like, well, it was amazing because after COVID, clearly there was a huge push for psychological health. People were realizing they were in a funk. Everybody, I think, was whipped after COVID-19, and a lot of people were reinventing themselves as a byproduct of that. And he's like, we would see a lot of podcasts where people were talking about, mental health. And that led to, a lot of people getting into psychedelics and, mushroom therapy and, things like that. And now they're seeing, they're like, a big theme now is people are becoming more aware, not just because of this time of the year, but people tend to have New Year's resolutions and are going to eat healthier and more kale or whatever it is. But the reality is I think people are becoming more aware of the impact that technology also has on their health, mentally and physically. And you're going to see people, the pendulum will shift back in a little bit where people will start, turning their phones over instead of leaving them face up at night when they go to bed, or just little things, little habits that are going to transcend into more things. Like, I'm going to take more of my conference calls while walking, which makes me want to eat better. And if I'm going to do that, then I'm going to have to sleep. You're just going to see this whole thing take place. I think that as you all are pioneers and are trying to advance in the innovation of technology so that we, the consumers, could have a better life, I look at the technology that you advance, not from the way I use it from social media. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people like it's the worst thing. I'm like, it is, and it's also the best thing. I've been able to reach more people and learn more things because of social media. So I don't want to get rid of it, but I do want to have a healthier balance with it. And I think that what you'll see is people will continue to move too fast to slow down and invest into their workforce, because the demand when we hit that gold rush, no one's going to stop to care about the other people that are in the trenches with them. I think that no one's going to stop to slow down and develop their talent. They're not going to invest into making sure they're okay, healthy. And I think the community impact and the impact of society that I can make is it started with the veteran community, which transcends into their dependents. And dependence is just another way of saying civilians, right? So that means everybody. So now our responsibility is to go and collect everybody who is struggling. How many Drew Breeses that were, great quarterbacks that went to the wrong team and then went to another team and became Super Bowl champions, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of people that are in the game, maybe the wrong part. And for me, I could see us aggregating the labor force and saying, okay, we'll create an incubator to where when people need labor, it'll be as a service. And for us, all we're simply going to do is make sure that they're healthy. Just like when you're at home and you call for the plumber, you're not asking for the resume. You're like, I hope that person's trained and they know how to fix it was Black Thursday after Thanksgiving, or what do they call it? Black Friday after Thanksgiving, right? Where all the plumbers, the biggest day for them is the day after Thanksgiving, right? So they need to have, the busiest day in the United States for plumbers is
Everybody's
the day after Thanksgiving. Plugging up toilets.
All right.
Right? So
lots of turkey.
A lot of people in one house.
But if you think about it, like, somebody's going to have to innovate people. Someone's going to have to innovate the way that we could grow, mentor, develop, and train people to be able to support your needs to grow. You can't standardize on that unless we standardize on how we help people get healthy again, right? So my focus is on the human element of what we're doing, but I'm fascinated with the things that you're doing, and we want to be lockstep with that, because I think at some point we'll grow so fast that that model, because there's only two models: you rip out and replace when someone is burned out, or they just move off on their own, right? There's not a lot of development back into people because people don't slow down and look backwards for that. But if you have a deliberate and intentional incubator model that knows that we'll be harvesting the 10% of the bottom part of the workforces from that company and that one, then we can turn talent into a service. And it could be an easy button, just like AI could be. And that's the only way to be able to bring it up, because that will be the infrastructure that's used to educate, which allows you to have a higher adoption rate. That's the incubator that's going to allow you to have a greater relationship with the communities that you're going to have an impact on. And they're going to recruit the engineers that, for engineers, I've learned that money doesn't mean shit to them. Currency is intelligence, right? The more they know, the more interesting it is they're doing, that's their currency. So if we could find the difference between those two different groups and bifurcate that workforce, then we could advance this industry. And that means, everything that you're doing on the mechanical side, that's the hardest part for what we do now, is the mechanical side. Because once you marry yourself to that, you're like, I hope I have the right stuff to support the densities that these new chips are coming in, or this new client that may be coming in that I can't support right now because I'm gonna have to rip out and replace everything. And if I'm an operator, it's a multi-tenant environment, and that's a shared infrastructure backplane, and I could put a lot of risk. I can introduce a lot of risks to all of my clients by trying to upgrade for one, right? So I think these conversations are going to allow us to tie it all back together, and we're going to have to continue to have these types of conversations. You guys agree?
Mm-hmm.
Healthy growth.
Yeah.
Rising tides, man.
Lift all boats. So is there anything else anybody wants to add? I mean, my mea culpa is I'm sorry that we didn't do this at DCAC Live, but I'm glad that I got a second swing at this pitch, right? Because I hope that now people that are listening to this aren't so scared about the topic of AI, and they realize that no matter what, if they're in this industry, they touch it. They just don't know how, and we could lay out breadcrumbs to help them find that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anything you want to add?
My goodness, you summarized it so well. In my final 2 seconds, don't be afraid to learn things. And Chris Crosby actually at DCAC Live talked about how you should be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that is a means and method to learn and increase your own wealth of knowledge beyond anything else. I think that's critical. And I'm hoping that this conversation that we're having today, if anything, a couple of gold nuggets, but if anything, plant some seeds and questions that hopefully people will come out and reach out and ask.
We're just wanting people to engage, right?
Yep.
How about you, Dean?
Pretty simple. You need to be in the community. Join iMasons. Everybody is welcome. And that is doesn't matter who you work for, what you change, whatever, it's about you. That's critical. And also reach out. Dean at imasons.org, Dean at Cato.digital.
Super approachable too, which was bizarre to me. I remember I reached out. I was like, hey man, I'm a nobody, but can I get 5 minutes? And you're like, let's do it. It's amazing this industry is like that. I mean, there's a lot of, every industry has its celebrities, right? I mean, if I say Bill Gates, you know who that is. If I say Kobe Bryant, you know who that is, right? We know celebrities from every vertical of industry. This industry has celebrities too. I'm surprised at how approachable most of them are.
I called Bill. I didn't know anything about immersion cooling and like advanced cooling.
On LinkedIn. I remember that.
I was like, hey,
that.
can I just call? You're like, just call me.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, I have these questions. I sent him like a list of questions. It was like a job application. I was like, oh, I'm asking that, and Bill's a celebrity. And so I'm asking the celebrity. And Bill's like, here's a Zoom link. Hops on a call. Like, just gives me the download. And I'm like, is this real? Is this not? And he's like, just advanced my education in seconds. That would have taken me much longer in books and wouldn't have gotten the context and all those things. So I'll pass it on. If I'm not the person, but I might be connected to the right people, Rob at opencompute.org. Ask me a question, ask me to connect you to somebody. Happy to help.
Awesome.
Same, ditto. L. Cruz at Accelsius, which is hard to spell. ACCELSIUS.com.
Awesome. And
I'm not giving out my email address. Just Google Bill. Sounds so
you have
pretentious.
too many.
Oh,
No,
kind of a big deal.
I do. You could
The
do
Ron Burgundy of the data center
iMason,
industry.
Bill at
Ron Burgundy now.
iMason.org.
There you go.
But otherwise, you could just BillKleyman.com or use your favorite generative AI engine.
Well, listen, this was a long one, but there's a lot to unpackage. And this long version podcast is designed to give people time to chip away at this. I mean, I'll have to listen to this podcast because you guys use a lot of words that aren't in my lexicon probably. But I want to say thank you for everybody for getting on a plane that came here to do this podcast. I think it's really important. I hope this podcast benefits the industry. I hope the benefit is allowing us to move the industry up. So thank you everybody for making the time, and thank you for joining the data center revolution.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.